Dr. Erick Ruto is the president of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and he joins us again in the hot seat this morning. Good morning, Dr. Ruto.
Good morning. How are you? Happy to be here again, but although not in a very nice environment and circumstance right now.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
That is quite the thing. There are a number of protests that have taken place in rapid succession over the last couple of weeks, and as those have happened, we've also seen that there has been the destruction of property, there's been the loss of business. It's not like I said, it's not a comfortable conversation for a lot of folks to have, but we must have it all the same. Even as we get into that, Dennis is going to share today's proverb. We would like to get your interpretation of that.
And the proverb today comes from Kenya, and since we are talking about the prices of protest, you look at the economy of the country and one looks at the resilience of the people. Whenever we put down, Kenyans tend to come back up. Look at SMEs and how much they contribute to the economy of the country. And we say we are doing better. We could do much, much better. But that notwithstanding, we continue to push. It's unfortunate that today we're having this discussion not on a very good position. But like we say, Kenyans are resilient. And we hope that the business community gets to get out of the shackles that they find themselves in. But our proverb today: a man who uses force is afraid of reasoning. A man who uses force is afraid of reasoning. How would you interpret that?
When I used to be young, we used to play, and there's something that we used to put in our hands, and you tell your opponent, touch, and you'll see. You getting? Mm-hmm. So I would say that I think if you play that game, and you touch that thing that was put on the finger, you'll have definitely some fight. So maybe I would interpret that I think we have a situation in our country that there are two conversations that are happening currently. So one side is saying, touch and you'll see. I have the instruments of peace and also of violence. So what I would say is that I think we have to come into a conversation. We have one country. It is this country called Kenya. I've just come from Zimbabwe, attending the 125th conference of the Zimbabwe Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and I was really pleased there, because I found that they are doing a road of 432 kilometers, and this road I was asking the chamber president there, is called Mr. Todoro, and he told me that it was given to local contractors, divided into 5 sections. 3 already awards had been given, so imagine if such a road was being done in Kenya, who will be doing those kind of contracts here in Kenya. So I would say, I think this is where we are at our crossroads. Thank you. Okay.
So it's interesting because as protests then, and as you think about development and you think about progression, from an industry perspective, when we think about protests, unfortunately, and then of course there's a whole political debate as to those who protest and those who infiltrate the protest then bring about a destruction to property, bring about a disruption to business. On Monday, Nairobi and its environs were ghost towns. Businesses did not open. People did not go to work. Nairobi County tells us that they lost 10.4 billion shillings as a result of that. That they would have been able to get, I guess, in tax and, cess and all kinds of things. This did not happen. But then beyond that, we also see the destruction of property. We see people go into hospitals, ruin things. We see people go into supermarkets and grab and, just lift things away. What's the economic loss, or what's the economic price of protests from your perspective?
Okay, thank you very much, Duoko. And I think the question that you ask is that we cannot deal with this question right now at this point in time. We have to look at the economic structure of this country. And maybe I would give you a little bit of some historical issues about our Kenyan economy and the structure of our Kenyan economy for the 5 or the 4 successive governments, and now we're in the 5th government. The first thing I would say in terms of cost to the economy, if you check our economic growth for 2023, that was at 5.7 in terms of growth on GDP percentage. 2024, It contracted to 4.7%. So what does that mean? What is the economic effect? I would take, for instance, that we lost, in terms of opportunities for growth, around taking our GDP at 13 trillion. 1% loss in terms of economic growth was 130 billion. What is this to the young people? The young people means jobs were lost. How many jobs were lost in terms of this protest? I would divide and say, if you have 130 billion, usually 30% goes into labor and wages. And if you take on average that entry-level jobs would be around 30,000, that would be around 116,000 jobs in terms of opportunities that we lost last year after the protest on the finance bill for 2024. But let me give you a little bit of some historical aspect before I go into the structure of our economy since independence. I've looked at as a country, our political dispensation across from 1964, since we got independence. There was a problem around 1969, and our economy contracted. It came to almost like 0.3%. In 1974, I think there's something that happened, and I was checking the economic growth. We've been having an average of around 5% economic growth since independence. And somewhere in 1974, after I think there's something happened with JM Kariuki, the economy came to growth 0.9%. 1982, after the coup, the economy contracted to and grew at 1.6%. 1990, which we are now terming it Saba, I would say, quote unquote, this is like the revolution that we had as a country. In 1990, the economy was growing at around 4.1%. It contracted to 1.3%. And in 1992, where we faced a lot of violence, it actually contracted at negative 1.1%. Fast forward, 2007, we had post-election violence. And again, in terms of costs to the economy, in terms of these political instabilities that has caused this country, when we come now to 2007, I would be able to, the economy again contracted, and it contracted to, at 2007, it was growing at 6.9%. We went to election, 2008, contracted at 0.2%. So consistently, during political instability, during protest, and this is not a new phenomenon, that our economy has suffered. And who suffers? It is this young person who is looking for livelihood. So since independence, the situation that we are facing currently, we have faced it almost 5 times. And we have faced it in 2023, and we are almost going to face a serious problem, because the demonstrations that are happening right now, it started genuinely about the 2024 finance bill, 2024-25, which as Kenya National Chambers of Commerce and Industry, we did our submissions and we had a lot of reservations, and we presented our views in our National Assembly. Again, we are coming fast forward to 2025, and we have had these demonstrations that are happening. Businesses have been affected. You've talked about the 10 billion that we have lost as a country. If you look at our economy and in terms of our GDP, and you remove the GDP in terms of government, the 4.3 trillion in terms of the budget, economically we are generating around 30 billion every day. So if you are losing 10 billion, that's approximately 30% of the economy due to the protest. But I would say is that, so what is the problem? That we have never gotten it right since 1969.
Gotten what right?
Solving our problems. In terms of each and every time, when there is a new government, we are protesting. And let me give you a little bit of historical aspects of these governments that we have had so far. This is the 5th one. During the first government, up to 1978, the first thing was Africanization. We didn't have land, so we acquired land. There was expansion of state enterprises. There was a control of prices. Then came in the second government of President Moi. And the issue there was Fuatanyayo. So he followed what the first president did. But I think somewhere around 1990, there was structural adjustment programs. There was globalization of the economy, there was liberalization, and therefore there was no protection of the local economy. Fast forward came the Kibaki government, and I think one of the key achievements then was we did have financial liberalization. Fast forward Uhuru government, I would term it as a Big Bang theory, the Big Bang effect of the economy. They did huge infrastructure developments. The railway was developed, yes. The roads were developed, yes. The energy was developed, but at what cost? We borrowed heavily. And by the time this government is coming in, we are at 68% in terms of GDP ratio, in terms of our debt. So what's happening? For every 10 shillings that government collects, we have to pay our debt, which stands at 1 trillion. So we have to pay approximately 63% of what we collect. So therefore, government must have looked and said, you definitely have to pay your debts. And if you don't pay, there's going to be very serious repercussions. We cannot trade internationally. So what happened is there were tax administrative measures that were done. Even before increasing the taxes, there was the issue of the e-teams, which I think quite a number of SMEs, which we do present, had a lot of issues. Then there was an issue about the salaries. We had the savings. I know we've been told that we are not a saving nation, but you cannot save when there is famine. That is something that has to be very clear. Of course, there was an issue about our healthcare cover in terms of SHA. There was a housing levy. So quite a number of raiding of our employees in terms of salaries in an environment where our economy is struggling. But fast forward, how come these 4 successive governments has never addressed the issue of employment? At independence, our population was around 7 to 8 million. Right now, we are dealing with 57 million plus as a country. 6 million youth are unemployed. 20 million are in the working age group. So, and we have never grown our economy beyond 7.2% in terms of contribution of manufacturing and industry. So therefore, we have to relook at how we structure our economy. We have to invest a lot on how we can become competitive as a country. And in terms of economic effect, I've just told you, a 1% reduction in terms of economic growth is 116,000. We cannot afford to lose that. But what we are seeing as a private sector is, with the demonstrations that have happened, yes, under our constitution, there is right of expression. But along the way, there has been a lot of interference from the political arm, both the government and the opposition, and the rhetoric. So for each and every weekend, we see them. They're on top of vehicles. They are in churches. They're in gatherings. They are having empowerment forums. And that empowerment forums, what I see is disguise. They are just politicking.
So what
the young people are seeing is that these people are not listening to us. Because I would expect the government of the day, under the PFMA Act, to be able to be engaging the youth, to be engaging the population across the country. But the moment we see the politicians of the majority going and behaving as if also they're in opposition and exchanging words, this is what fuels this protest. As a private sector, what we are saying, we are in a situation whereby it's a very dire situation. Do we leave our businesses? There is no security. We have to provide security ourselves. That's why you saw in Nairobi the streets here. They have hired people with the sticks, with some crude equipment. My chairman from Meru, his facility was vandalized. It was looted. So what we are saying as a business community, yes, peaceful protests, we support 100%. But the goons who have come in, and we have information that there are goons who have been sponsored, and also lawless Kenyans who are taking opportunities of otherwise a very genuine process. We should stop that one. We cannot allow, as a business community, for our businesses to be looted, because what will happen, in fact, is that it's going to be a vicious circle. We are going to lose jobs. These young people are looking for jobs. So those jobs that we have, we should protect it using all the means that we have. But finally, let me give you about the issue of I know the young people, they're very excited about this protest. They are very excited. Let me give you
excited, is that the word you used to use?
Yeah, because they come and they say we have nothing to lose. You're getting? But let me give them a history of revolutions that have happened. And I'm going to give you two analogies that have happened. When the French Revolution happened, at that time, there was no leader for that revolution. They came in. I think along the way, someone took advantage, called Napoleon. It took the French, that revolution, 80 years for them to be stable. So what we are saying is they should have, so that goons do not infiltrate the peaceful protest. And whoever else who wants to protest, they should be organized. They should have a proper plan. They should have leadership. And I think the adage, and you started by the saying, if you do not plan, you plan for failure. So if you're going to lead protest, let us have a clear leadership for these young people. They're saying they're tribeless and they're leaderless. There is no protest that would lead into a meaningful, positive outcome if they are not planning, if they don't have leadership. Let's move very fast to the other side. And I would say why our economy is ailing. There was a similar protest in China in 1989. It was called Tiananmen Square. Did the protest succeed? No, it was completely crushed. The military came in and it was completely crushed. But the disease that had happened that time is that the Chinese government had borrowed heavily. They had done infrastructure, they had done the roads, they had done the electricity. And the inflation went up to 25%. Salaries were not increasing. So what happened then? The young people, there were no jobs. The ones who were employed, they could not afford the cost of living then. What happened is that there was proper prescription to the economy. And I would say, I think what has happened for the 4 successive governments that have happened is, if you get a patient who is bleeding and that patient goes to hospital, what you need to do is to replace the blood that is lost. What I'm seeing from this protest that we have had from 1969, 1974, 1982, 1990 Sabasaba, 2007, is that we have added to this patient only water. We have not prescribed the right medication. And I take you very fast. We do not want to go the French way, where they took 80 years to be able to find themselves and to have a government that was listening to them. What happened after the Tiananmen Square? They looked at the economy, and within 5 to 10 years, they were able to change the economy and they were able to create employment. And as we talk today, they moved 600 million people from poverty to meaningful livelihood. So what I would say is this. Our situation in this country is that with any protest, we prescribe the wrong medicine, which is water. We change our constitution. We say politics is going to change our economy. I know the young people are saying, so long as the current government leaves, we'll be sorted. That is not the situation. Let us learn by history. We must prescribe proper economic structure and policies that talks to the small businesses. Take, for instance, this country. How come in a country that we have, the SMEs contribute 40% to the GDP and 82% of the employment, while the 60% only contributes 18% of the employment? There is a structural problem in our economy. So we have to change, and we do not have to prescribe political solutions. As we talk currently, I think the reason why we are having a lot of instability currently is because, one, the devolution and the constitution that we have right now is extremely expensive. We are competing with the rest of the world. We are competing with Uganda, we are competing with Tanzania, we are competing with our neighboring countries, and even internationally. So what happens if we spend all our money in terms of constitutional and political offices?
So then in that case, don't you then agree if you're to look at Kenya as a patient, because you gave that classic example of a patient who goes to hospital and they need blood, but they're given water. And you've given, those examples of the French Revolution, for example, what happened in China. And we like comparing ourselves to other countries more often than not in terms of modeling and looking at examples. But if you're to then look at the French Revolution, it happened in phases over the 8 years that you're talking about.
80, not 8.
80.
80. 80. So the agencies, if you don't take care of this, what is happening? It will take your great-grandchildren to bring back this country to where to where you want it to be.
But if that is what then it will take, because if you look at Kenya as a patient,
yes,
you're not just, back then with the French Revolution, there was issues of social justice, there was the issue of politics and governance. In Kenya, it's beyond that. In Kenya, we are talking about economy. We're talking about corruption. We're talking about impunity. We're talking about social justice.
Accountability.
We're talking about accountability. So if you're to look at all those as diseases to this one body called Kenya, so you are treating a migraine, you're treating
high blood pressure. You're treating all kinds of things, and all those require different treatments, and all these treatments take time. If you're treating a migraine, it may take maybe 3 days. If you're treating high blood pressure, it may take 5 years or 10 years. Are we then not trying to fix this problem that we have in Kenya by saying we need these guys to have a leader, we need them to come to the table and talk, we need dialogue, and that's what Raila Odinga was prescribing, a conclave. Let's sit down, and people are saying, we've had these conversations for far too long. We've talked about reforms for far too long. We've talked about this thing of sitting down, let's reason together for far too long. What is ailing this country is not too strange or foreign to the leadership. They know what is wrong. Why would it then take all this time?
And rightfully, I totally agree with you, because changing personalities will not, I think we've seen right now, we are in the 5th government. We have changed personalities. I would even say the current government was a revolution in its sense, because it was the government, in its sense. There was a government which was in power, and there was the opposition. And they combined against a candidate who, by de facto, was not in government.
Hustlers versus dynasty.
Yes. So that was a revolution in its sense.
Revolution, by definition, is actually supposed to bring about a new dispensation.
Yes, so it was actually supposed to bring it.
Yeah.
But those issues that you're talking about, how come we are not seeing that aspect the young people are asking about accountability?
The solution that would be found as a result of revolution, you talk about the marriage of two sides of government coming together into a revolution. You said it was a revolution of sorts. Revolutions, as we know them and by definition, are supposed to birth something, Dr. Ruto. We should get to the place where you see, because of the struggle, because of the blood on the streets, because of the guts that was spilled, then we see that, okay, then maybe, it was worth it, isn't it? What did we see?
Yeah, what I would say is that I think there was a lot of expectation for this government by the hustlers. And specifically because they voted in a president who was not with the current government and with the largest opposition then. Then fast forward, in terms of prescribing to the economy, within a period of 2 years, and that is why politics might not be the only solution for our economic challenges that we have as a country. Moving fast forward is that the two top people disagreed, and one of them was impeached. And these young people are seeing that there is a lot of political activities at the top, but we are not getting employment. So what I should think is that the people who've been given that power should concentrate on solving the economic problems and reduce the political activities.
Dr. Erick Ruto,
yes.
Are you saying the president and his administration should focus on fixing the economy?
That is what I would say. And I would say in that they should create an environment that would be able to have that kind of the economic environment. Because if we continue with high-octane politics to a point whereby a deputy president is impeached and there were bedfellows. The effect on the economy is that we're going to lose confidence.
Dr.
Yes.
Let's look at the issues that are being raised. You say that the president needs to fix the economy.
Yes.
You go back to the origin of the protest of the Gen Z, it was pretty much the same thing: fix the economy, stop the looting, address all these injustices. And as we speak here today, you say the political class is making it difficult for the economy to do better, right? Are you being heard?
I would say we have been doing it diplomatically, and the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we have engaged the governors across the country. We have engaged the Minister of Trade, Industry and Investment. We have engaged the Minister of Small Medium Enterprises. And it has been culminated into a national engagement with His Excellency the President, Dr. William Samoei Ruto.
Okay.
When we had a 6-hour engagement between delegates of Kenya National Chambers of Commerce across the 47 chapters, 600 leaders of business across this country. And we agreed on some steps to be able to fix the economy. And we agreed that we're going to have quarterly meetings because we represent those SMEs. One of the things that we presented to the president, first of all, yes, reduce the high-octane politics. The second thing, there's the issue of the pending bills, which some of our businesses have done business with government. They have gone without being paid for the last 4 years, 5 years, and it is not a creation of this government. The issue of the interest rates that are very high, we had a discussion on that issue. On the issue of multiple levies, very high standards that are being prescribed by several regulatory organizations for the SMEs and even the charges that are being levied on those standards, and multiple levies across the counties. We agreed on how we should be able to bring them down. And I will be able to invite you and I will share you those discussions, and we are going to have another conversation in the next 2 months with the president, yes.
In those conversations,
Yes.
was this idea of the National Overseas Job Recruitment Program ever discussed? Because to circle back on what you earlier raised about, improving the economy and making sure that our young people have jobs, yet the same government comes up with a plan and says to these young people that, we'll get you jobs abroad. And we know how that has turned out. Was that ever part of the plan?
Yeah, part of the discussion that we had with the president is that we have to look at our economy. Currently, we are importing 2.7 trillion, exporting 1.1 trillion. So that's a negative of around 1.7 trillion. Today, Dennis have come to studio with a shirt that is made by a Kenyan lady, a young lady. She's called Carol. She's at Kilimani.
That counter.
This is a counter suit.
There's something said.
I would have wished that the vertical integration in the manufacturing sector, that this one that I'm wearing is that the fashion and the synthetic fabric was made in Kenya. But unfortunately, it was not made in Kenya. And therefore, we have reached a point as a country. It is not good for people to go and work in other countries. In fact, it is good because what happens is they'll be able to bring technology and they'll be able to represent Kenya in terms of trade and even creating market for our products in those countries. But it should be an optional kind of thing. So I think the response that government is looking at is that they are looking at 6 million youth. We are having economic growth of around 5%, which is not able to absorb those 6 million youth. And therefore, we have to create opportunities outside this country. So, yes, we have had discussions with the Ministry of Labour on that issue of our youth going to other countries. And I would say, in fact, there are other countries who invest in this. We talk about Philippines. We talk about India. India actually went to the US. And if you go to the US right now, in terms of IT and technology, for around 30%, especially in the big corporations, is the Indians who are CEOs of those corporations. So it's not bad as a country because they'll be able to bring that technology back to our country. But I would say it should not be that the economy has failed and therefore we send our young people abroad. What I would say is that is a temporary measure. We must look at how we have to create a conducive environment, the cost of doing business. Let's talk, for instance, on manufacturing. Why is it that a shirt that is selling at Luduli Avenue, 2,000 shillings, my member from Thika Clothing Mills, she's promoting almost 100,000 farmers in Msambweni. How come a shirt cannot sell at 2,000 shillings in the streets at Luduli Avenue?
Because how many people will be able to afford a shirt at 2,000 shillings?
No, what I'm saying...
That's the paradox of the economy, isn't it?
No, what I'm saying is this. It's not about affording. First of all, it's about the cost of production. Because the farmer says, unless I sell my cotton at not less than 60 shillings per kg, you're getting, it is not viable for that farmer. Unless the cost of power to the industry, and we have assessed, especially the big industry, unless it is around 8 US cents, we cannot be competitive as a country. Unless the cost of credit, because the same business, you're borrowing at 18-20%, I think that's the current average. We are competing with people who are producing textiles, they are producing household consumer goods, they are producing things that we are using on a daily basis, and they are accessing credit at between 6, 7, 8, 9% globally. And we know logistics has been solved. If, for instance, you want to transport one container from let's say, any part of the world to here, is around $1,000. For you to transport that container from Mombasa to Nairobi, is around $1,500. So we have to see how we have to make sure that the cost of doing business in Kenya, and that is where the conversation needs to start.
But Erick, as you talk about the environment and cost of doing business in the country, one critical aspect that as well has to be dealt with is the corruption that is in the country, you know. So here is a question where an investor comes to the country, wants to put up a business, a manufacturing plant, but the bureaucracies in government for them to just get registration and do business is so high that they have chosen to get out of Kenya and go to neighboring countries. So how then do we fix the economy if we do not fix the corruption in the
area? First of all, I would not agree on foreign-centric kind of investments and promoting foreign investments in Kenya. Because what we've seen is that around 85% of manufacturing in Kenya is controlled by big multinationals and big companies. So 85% is left to the hustlers. So what I would say is that we should make it, first of all, comfortable for the local manufacturers to be able to thrive. You're talking about corruption. Yes, we should have zero tolerance to corruption. But who is corrupt? Is it Dr. Ruto? Is it Dennis? Is it Nduoko? Or it is the president? Who carries the highest responsibility in terms of corruption? So yes, the issue of corruption, we definitely have to address. But one day I was hearing the politicians and I was saying, when it goes to elections, in fact, in some regions, the more you are corrupted, the more you stand a higher chance of being elected. Because we are the ones who place these people in power. In how much they give you when you're going to vote, you've seen people are lining up and they're being given money. So that is where the corruption starts with. You've seen currently the peaceful protest that has started. Now there are people who are being funded to cause mayhem, to loot businesses. So I would say, I think we have to clean ourselves, first of all, in the mind, and each and every individual. I remember when Kibaki came into power, I was still young that time, and I'm one of the people who voted, although from quote unquote, you know, we've been a very tribal country. I was finishing the university then, is that there used to be 50 shillings for the matatu. The cost of corruption then increased and it went to 200 because they were saying if you are caught, you are going to face dire consequences. So we almost killed it, but we increased the value of corruption. So what I would say, it starts with between me and you. If you're on the road today and you see a police officer or a government officer being bribed, or you want to get a license and someone is asking, if we have that massive protest, and protest doesn't mean that you have to have numbers on the street. We have to protest those kind of behaviors that are happening. That is how we are going to save this country out of corruption. Thank you.
Okay. Do you think, and many have said this, that two wrongs don't make a right? That's for sure. But from what I'm hearing you say, and stop me if I'm wrong, that if we don't have protests, then we will not have this infiltration of this terrible behavior. Is that what you're saying? Are you saying then stop the protests and we'll not see the destruction of property?
No, what I would say is that the people who are leading the protest actually should condemn the people who are infiltrating and the goons who are coming.
While they are protesting?
While they are protesting, even after the protest, and they should be able to single out these people who are financing these goons.
Okay, so let me give you an example.
Yes.
They did single them out. On Sunday, there were women who were giving a presser at the Kenya Human Rights Commission on James Gishuru. It was 120, 200 meters from the Mudhangari police station. They went to the police station and they said, look, they even have these pictures of these individuals on CCTV. And they went and they reported to the OCS and they said, look at what is happening. This cannot be allowed to happen. Today is Wednesday. Not a peep, not a word, nothing. We've come here, it's been said. This is a repeated action over and over again. So if we have a system that already is not adhering to the very thing that you're talking about, there are CCTV footages of people in business, in the Nairobi business district, who have pictures of people who came and looted their shops. And yet there's very little that's done. It's a systemic issue. How then, what more should people do apart from the calling out, even showing the pictures of the individuals? What more?
There's even a story here, because you mentioned, was it Meru?
Yes, Meru.
Where your chair was also affected?
Yes.
Meru and, where is this? In Moranga. The story here in the dailies is that locals saw busloads of foreign youths traveling from other towns on Sunday evening and were seen loitering on the streets all day long. The alien youths caused tension as locals closed down their businesses, shops in anticipation of vigorous protest. Some, just to summarize the story, even reported that they are seeing very strange faces in their towns to the police. Before the destruction that we saw in Meru and we also saw in Moranga and other parts of the country, that people were actually transported and these things were reported.
Actually, I would like to collaborate with you, and for Mary's situation, it was reported that there were 4 Prados that were seen there, of course, which had number plates. So what we want to do is that the government should not be complacent with organized goons. They should be arrested, they should be judged, so that if there is anyone who is overzealous, like for instance, the human rights people who are congregating here in Mudhangari, what we want to see as a private sector is there was CCTV. You could be able to identify those young people who are there. They have systems of even identifying who planned those things. Those people now should have been arrested.
Should have been.
Exactly. Within 24 hours, they are taken to court, so that if there is an overzealous supporter of anyone, they should see the consequences. I would definitely presume that, I don't know whether these are things which are sanctioned from whichever level, but I would presume those are things that we need to discourage, because the moment we have another wrong and another wrong, we are going to have anarchy and we are going to have chaos as a country. Definitely it cannot continue like that. What I would say is that the right to protest, peaceful protest, must be protected, but the issue of violence, organized groups and goons and lawlessness, in fact, the protesters should even be providing security for businesses, that whoever is seen carrying away TVs, things from the supermarket, should be arrested by those protesters and be taken to the police for prosecution.
Okay.
So that we see there is that vision of having a Kenya that is working for everyone. Thank you.
All right. Our time is up. It's you have to ask questions about the system. You have to ask questions about where we're really going. We have to have the conversation. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, it's what else are you looking for? Evidence in plain sight.
Maybe some closing remarks.
Really quickly, in about 10 seconds.
Okay. So thank you very much. What I would say that in the current situation, let's not divide the baby. Let's have the Solomonic wisdom that we had. Capital is a flight. And we have statistics in terms of FDIs that are coming and FDIs that are going outside from our country. So what I would say is this: we must create a conducive environment. People must climb down from the big offices. We must have conversations across the country. Thank you very much.
Dr. Erick Ruto is the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry President. He's been here with us this morning. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for making the Situation Room the way to start your morning, the way to start your day. We'll continue again tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.